All right.
We are live
We are live.
for our last
Yeah,
conversation of this series. I hope we do more,
I do
honestly.
too. This is good. And I think that you know what we're modeling here is just conversations are so important.
Yes.
I mean, really, when you get down to it, it's not even about, okay, these are the 5 things you have to do. It's about being in conversation with the people who are important so that you know what you need to do. And yes, there are some guidelines, right? For sure, there are some guiding principles, maybe,
Yep.
but it's
Yeah, and I
bringing
and I
in.
think that's the nice thing about having these conversations also is that even if we're in the space, it feels comforting to have these conversations with other people,
Yeah,
whether, you know, and the more we talk about it, the easier it is. But even, even if we talk about it regularly, it's still
exactly.
hard sometimes, and it still takes practice on how to be vulnerable or to,
Right, right. Well,
about it.
truly, and I think that that's one of the things that sort of speaks to finding support groups. And even if a support group is 3 people, or one
Yeah.
other person, find another person because we carry this with us all the time. And hearing how other people have done it might teach us how to do it. We might say, I would never do that, but that's okay. That's still information.
Yeah.
And it's not, I'm not suggesting we find who to judge. I'm suggesting hear about all the different ways these things might be occurring, and you'll find something that will hopefully fit for you. And then there is no one way. There is no one way.
No.
So it's about getting in there and getting messy, because what you and I have both found is that this can be really messy sometimes, but that doesn't mean we should avoid it. We can jump into it.
Yeah, and if it doesn't go the way that we had planned the first time, okay, we need to reassess how we approached it, and maybe emotions got thrown in that maybe could have come out in a different
Right.
way.
Right.
And so sort of staying open to shifting how we have these conversations if the first time doesn't work the way we want it to.
Absolutely. A lot of times when I do talks with people, I do talk about how do you have difficult conversations? And I start with what makes a conversation difficult, right? And I
Yeah.
draw from a great book it's actually a business book, and I may have mentioned it on one of our conversations, but it's called Crucial Conversations, and it's a business book, but it's really fits for any kind of crucial conversation. And it's when the stakes are really high, when the emotions are really high, and when there's the probability that there are differing opinions, right? And so my advice always is for people to start with themselves and to check yourself. What am I hoping to do in this conversation and learn in this conversation or get in this conversation, right? And if you approach your parents with, I just want to have a discussion, but what you really want to do is tell them what to do, that's not a discussion.
Yeah.
That you're coming in with an agenda, and that might be what you need to do. So let me say that doesn't mean that's off the table. There are times when we have to say, hey, these are some things, and it isn't I can't give you any options right now because this is what I can do, and I can't do these other things you're asking me to do. So we may come in with an agenda, right? But we should be frank about that right away. I believe that will get us further. That's usually what plays out better. But if we approach something with, we really want to convince somebody to do something, and we say, I just really want to know what you want, and we really don't want to know what they want, then it's going to spiral out of control. So, and then, so I do feel like you have to be clear with yourself, and that helps you enter the conversation cleaner.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
then you
I
can
fully agree. I mean,
thank you.
coming
Yeah.
in with that goal of what is this conversation, and also being able to pause in the conversation if something is getting heated, if there is disagreement brewing and you're feeling it, and before becoming that reactive, I know that sometimes when I'm around my parents for too long, I revert back to my teenage self, and I hate going back to that version of that family dynamic.
Right.
And sometimes it requires just pausing, taking some breaths, even if you have to be like, hey, I just need 1 minute,
Yeah.
taking that minute. um, then it's more likely to, you know, get past that moment
Yeah.
and lead to some more productive conversations as opposed to becoming either our reactive selves or doing what you're saying, where you're sort of telling someone what they want or what you want versus being curious and open.
Yeah.
And even if there's disagreement, sort of understanding what their side of it is
Right. Right.
first.
And I will say this too. I think I have been a part of or witnessed or uh, worked with folks who have had the experience of a parent wanting something vastly different than what the adult children want, right? And so the question becomes, who gets to make some of those decisions, right? And so if your parent is of sound mind, right? We're talking about somebody who still has, the ability to make some decisions. If they make a decision that you're not comfortable with, do they have the right to make that? I mean, that can depend on a lot of things. I mean, ultimately, I kind of feel like they do, but it may not be comfortable for you to hear
Yeah.
that I just, no, I don't want to do certain things. I don't want to change my habits in any way. And, you can kind of see the end of the road and it looks terrifying. But you know what? Um, that's so that might not be the choice you make for yourself, but that might be a choice someone else makes.
And if you're putting your values or beliefs or, onto someone else, and,
Oh, yeah.
oftentimes people will dig into their own, even if they would be open to change because they just don't want to take the advice of someone else or be told what to do. It doesn't feel good, with ageism or,
Yeah.
person might have complete capacity and just have a different point of view of their children.
Yeah.
And like that is okay. It
Right.
exactly what you're saying. It might not be comfortable if they are, safe,
Right.
if they are happy or content with their choices. There is a
Yes.
certain, you know, self-determination where they get to make choices until that changes.
Right, right, exactly. And I mean, this can kind of come in all kinds of shapes, right? And forms. It could be something around faith practices, or it could be something around money, or it could be something around medication, or something around, I mean, it could be a number of things. And it's just really hard and so that's why I say it always is important to allow yourself time for self-reflection, and then maybe some conversations you need to have would be with someone else. Could be a friend, could be a family member, could be a coach, somebody, a neutral party, to just process some of that therapy, something to help you process. I'm frustrated with the decisions I'm seeing being made, and yet I can't take any of this away from them. It's
Yeah.
not my right legally or even ethically, so how do I live with that? How do I sit with that? And then you can set up boundaries from there. And I think this is a big struggle that a lot of people encounter. And there's a lot of shoulds in caregiving, like, oh, I should do all these things. And there are some things that you might have to do legally, but there are in some states, and you might know more about this than me, Marnie, but filial laws, right? So that you have to look, we have to take care of our children, right? That there's some laws around that, right? You adopt or birth a child and you're raising them, there are some things you got to do, right? And then if you don't, there's somebody's going to come in and say, hey, this is not okay. So we protect vulnerable people, our children, right? But our elders can become vulnerable people, and yet they may be making decisions that we don't care for. But adult children aren't always on the hook legally. I think if a person becomes in some states, if an elder person becomes a burden on the state, they can look for, are there relatives who can help this
Sure.
person, but there's only a certain amount that the state can get from you and push you towards, and those aren't really very powerful. Those aren't, I think, employed very often, right? That doesn't mean they're not there, but the reason I bring this up is that there are a lot of people who are caring for someone who they did not have a great relationship with.
Totally.
And yeah, and so to what extent do you give your life over to someone in the care of someone who you feel harmed you, And so and even somebody who you dearly loved, there aren't a lot of services out there sometimes. And depending on where you live, and costs of caregiving are extremely high. And so to what extent do you put yourself at risk, or your children, or your family? Maybe do you stop contributing to a college fund because now you have to pay for 24-hour care for your
Yeah.
parent? What are your boundaries on that? And
Yeah,
what are
I mean,
things?
no, these are really challenging conversations where you're, I mean, again, sort of stuck in the middle of this caregiving between, potentially, children and adults, and especially with different family dynamics at play. And I think that, it is always helpful, not always. I would say it can be really helpful to have someone who's helping facilitate these conversations if it hasn't been going well, or if there are dynamics at play that run deep. And that there's a disagreement in how to move forward, especially if the children are going to be responsible in some way for their parents. And so whether it's a mediator, a facilitator, a coach, a therapist, but I would say not be afraid of bringing in someone who can act as a neutral third party to, at least try to dive into some of the issues that are coming up, that there might be disagreements about what care looks like in the future, and who's responsible for what, and if there are disagreements in how to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I really found my own personal experience was having a neutral party weigh in with my parents about their ability to stay in their home was a game changer. It was one thing to hear their daughter, me, or my sister or my brother say, we're worried about you, worried about this, what are worried about, and I see this and I see that. And they could wave that off as they're, you guys are you're just worried about us. And that's really lovely, but we're fine. We're fine. We're fine. When I was able to find a geriatric case management team to come in and do an assessment, and I was lucky that their insurance policy, their long-term healthcare plan, did pay for that. But even so, it would have been worth it out of my own pocket, because it was a game changer. They heard that person. It was a case manager and a geriatric nurse. They could communicate to my parents as non-biased people who had some, assessment data to be able to talk, like they took time and they talked to them and they looked at things. And that was a game changer. And it took the pressure off me. Then it wasn't, oh, Christy's just forcing us out. Christy's doing these things to us. It was, oh, okay, let's look at this. And, sometimes a primary care doc can serve that role, but some of them are reluctant to do that. They don't want to get too deep in the weeds with you. That's not their job necessarily. So I do feel like sometimes a neutral party can really play a strong role to help ease these relationships.
Yeah, I mean, and similarly with adult children who may not be on the same page,
Right.
How can we start having those conversations between, us, our generation, but also if we get stuck, what are the next steps? It's not just burn it all down.
Right.
Who
Right.
can help us move forward and come up with solutions, or just ask the right questions? Because like you're saying, we could hear it to the cows come home from someone who is close to us, and will be like, I will not accept it, or it will not process. And it just sometimes clicks when someone else can step in.
Yeah.
Have you thought about it like this?
And I definitely have seen that. I have been the recipient of and beneficiary of that kind of dynamic. I know the opposite is true too. There are a lot of people who do not trust outsiders.
Yeah.
And that may be your family dynamic. And so then it might be looking at other ways to kind of have those conversations. It might mean, um, you know, finding in the family who can start the conversation off, who's ready to kind of take some heat, and then who's your good cop, bad cop, dynamic going to come in and help out with some things or whatever. I mean, and that sounds very manipulative too. I feel like it really is important to come from a place of love. That's me. I feel like that's where we can have the most impact on people, because we are talking about life and relationships and family. And love can look a lot of different ways. Love isn't always just, oh, everything's great. Sometimes love is, hey, I need to give you some hard truth here. So it's just how you approach that, but knowing your family dynamics. Some people are going to be really open to somebody outside, and other people are going to be like, nope, won't listen to anybody but my family, or I won't even listen to them. So then you're stuck. And so then it becomes, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with the decisions that someone made that is an adult and has the right to make those decisions, and you don't agree with them? What do you do? Do you just cut off time, or do you adjust and deal with your own emotions around what's been decided? And that can be tough too, right? So
Yeah, it
those are important
definitely
things.
can be hard to let go or to let people live the way that they're choosing to live, even if it's not the way. I don't know if you've read the Mel Robbins book yet, like the Let Them theory, but really sort of what is in your control
Sure.
and what is not in your control.
Right.
But even with, even when we're talking about, adult siblings, you can grow up in the same home and have a very wildly different experience with your parents or with, within each other.
Yes.
And so it can be really hard when some people look at their parents one way or had one experience and other siblings didn't. And how can you all come together to
Yeah.
sort of figure out how to split up roles and responsibilities, or, make sure that everyone's on the same page,
Yeah.
about what's going on.
Yeah, and that is an awesome point. And I think we forget. It's easy to forget that, or even it's not even about forgetting. Some people aren't aware that, really you could have 5 kids in the same family, same parents, same house, went to the same schools, all of that, but you had 5 different childhoods because you are 5 different individuals, right? And
Yeah.
it's not necessarily about birth order. There may or may not be something to that, but it's about your 5 individuals. And so when and you're at least some time period apart, unless you're unless you're quintuplets, right? Or triplets or whatever. And even then,
Yeah.
you have individual needs and individual attitudes. And so we've had 5 different childhoods. And so sometimes as adults, we might say, well, this is what it was like for me. And a sibling might say, it wasn't like that at all. But it wasn't like that for them.
Right.
So we have to be aware that, and be sensitive to the fact that, we're not denying someone else's reality. We're just saying that wasn't my experience. And that's an important thing, because that definitely can play out in these times. And so these are some of those other incidental conversations that can come up out of this time
Yeah.
that can also lead to deeper understanding between siblings, and that's tough. Some stuff can come up that can be very frightening and scary for folks, but so I'm not suggesting that we, tear all of this up and, whatever. But I think that if we're talking about some of these difficult conversations, it's just being aware of, all the different.
It can be very healing.
Of course. Yeah.
I know that I've had conversations with my sister, even in the past year, where we looked at a situation in our childhood or with, with our parents in very different ways, and hearing her perspective or what she experienced during a specific time was eye-opening for me.
Yeah.
And it made me really think about memory and how we process things, and exactly what you're saying, as the elder sister versus the younger sister,
Mhm.
How we looked at specific instances. And it's not in regard to a specific, parental thing that we're talking about right now. But I think that starting to even have these conversations about parents can lead to a deeper understanding of of what's going on with
Right.
with how we're showing up now with our parents.
Right. And even amongst siblings, there may be some that are more willing to talk about things like death and others that are like, yep, I don't really want to talk about that. And so we
Yeah.
have to respect that, but then also think about how do we work through moving through conversations with mom and dad. One of the conversations that I'm in with my own adult children right now is how do you want us to let you know when someone's fallen ill or someone passed away or something happened? How do you want us to communicate that? Because my children don't live with me anymore. They're
Right.
adults. They live outside our home and are functioning in their own lives, and really proud of them for that. But I'm going to have to pass on some information that may be hard to hear. So how do you want to receive this? And my son was so clear. He was like, as soon as you send me the text that says, give me a call, I know we're going to have a conversation. I'm not really going to want to hear, but I know we're going to need to do it. So just do it, but, or do I just try to call, and they live really far from us too. So do I do this when they would be getting a text at 3 o'clock in the morning? Do I need to? Do I need to do it and wake them up at 3 in the morning if they even get it? Or is that the first thing they see in the morning? It's thinking about those things. So just literally having conversations like that can also be respectful and help us think about what are different people's values and how do we, share that information in a way that's, it's going to be hard anyway. So what's the
Yeah.
best way for me to do that? So
And
those
I
are
and I
important things.
think on the flip side of that, Christy, also is, can the children share with their parents, hey, it's okay for you to tell me when something's wrong.
Yeah.
There is some sort of like permission also. There have been several instances where I've gotten the call that I'm fine, but and something's already happened
Right.
and they've already, left
Right.
the hospital or, whatever. And, I'm left in a position of shock that, okay, great, they're okay, but it's okay for you to tell me
Yes.
when something's going on. It's okay for you to give me that 3 a.m. call if you're scared or if something's gone on. You don't
Right.
have to wait until you know you're okay, because what if you weren't okay?
Right. Right.
So I think that there's that side of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good one. And we actually encountered that too. It's like, but we didn't want to bother you. I'm like,
Right.
okay, but 24 hours later, it's okay. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm like, just let me know. And I also want to say as a psychologist with young kids, my background is as a school psychologist, we also have to think about our young kids and how do we talk to them, right? How we talk to our 5-year-old about something, about death and about dying is going to be different than how we would talk to maybe a 15-year-old. And then we have to be aware of what our children might be going through. If we have a child who has some, specific sensitivities or things that might make it difficult for them to hear this information, we need to, because there are a lot of kids that are going through their own stuff right now. And so we might not want to tell them every little thing that's going on. Okay, and then this, and then that. It's how do we package that for age appropriate conversations and being aware of that. And I would just encourage people, if you don't know how to do it, lean into some of the resources that are probably available to you, right? There could be school staff, counselors, or school psychologists like I was, or even community counselors that you can call on, because it's difficult sometimes to have those conversations with kids, and you might not know how to say it. And then people sometimes don't want to tell kids the real story. And, again, what we say to a 5-year-old is going to be different than a 15-year-old. And then how much detail do we give even older kids? How much detail do they need? We don't need to scare anybody. I will say this. I do think with little kids, sometimes, we tend to, at least in this country, a lot of times use very gentle language around death. We don't say died as much as we say passed. And that's wonderful. And that has also cultural ramifications, right? In a lot of cultures, that's how you might speak it. It's important, though, to make sure kids understand what death means. And they're, again, like a 3-year-old's not really going to get it, but by 5, 6, 7, they're going to understand that. And it's how do you share that? So there are some great books out there for how to talk to kids about
I
death
was
and
just
dying.
curious if there are
Yeah.
ones that you know, have found to be very helpful with.
Yeah, there's a great one called Everyone Dies, I think is what it's called, by Marianne Motso. That's a really good one. I will tell you, believe it or not, Sesame Street. Elmo has the words. I'm telling you, look at any of the things that have come up with around grief with Sesame Street on YouTube, and you can find some great things. And they're very clear about just, that this is what happened. It's just being very clear. And we can prime all of these difficult conversations with our kids when they're little, when we don't shy away from just the normal, natural process of life and death, right? Plants die, pets die, people die. And
Natural part of the cycle.
yes, and we share this in a way that's not scary so that they feel like, okay, well, if I don't see you, then that means you're gone, right? Well, that's not the same thing. So we have to, have some of those conversations, but it's trying to stay away from things like, well, grandma went to sleep and she's just not going to wake up. Well, your kid's never going to want to see you go to sleep. They're just going to be terrified.
Yeah,
So
same with like had a bad headache, or when you're talking about things in a very loose way, kids take things very literally, and you don't want them to start having fear around, certain things,
Right.
took a fall, or, kids fall all the time. You want to make sure that that you're being careful with how you're sharing this information.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on, with kids being part of the very end, like let's say of a grandparent's life, at the very end, or, going to the funeral or not being invited to the funeral?
Yeah, those are great questions. My overriding thing is not forcing anyone to do something that they're not able to do. And it's okay, whatever age someone is, if they don't want to go see someone who is in the process of dying, not to force that, not to say things like, well, you're going to regret this later if you don't do it now. Just, it's okay. It's okay. On the other hand, you can invite and you can say, I can be here with you. And then the other thing I would say is this is where you want to call in people to help you. So you may want to stay with your parent or your person who's passing away, but your child may need some care. So get the neighborhood friend, get the cousin or the aunt or the uncle, or, their child's best friend's mother, or someone who can help and swoop and pick them up and give them some, TLC while you're staying and doing what you need to do for your process. And that's the same that I would say for things like funerals, right? If you're going to be really, really emotional and you have young children, find those people who can also sit with your young children. They may be right next to you, but when you're sobbing and it's scaring your child, they might be able to take them out and do something with them if that's what you think would be best for them. It's just important to just to not force anybody, a child, to do something that's going to be traumatizing for them, but also realize that they're going to be sad, and being sad is not the same thing as being traumatized.
Completely. And it's okay to show feeling and emotion in front of your children.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be scared or traumatized. It means that you're showing that this is okay.
Yes.
To grieve.
Yeah. And you might say before a funeral or a memorial service, this is going to be hard for me, honey, and I'm probably going to cry. And I just want you to know I'm okay. But my heart does hurt a little bit, and your heart might hurt too. And crying is a normal response. So we're good with that, and those are the things that we want to do. But I do feel like have some supports around. I think if you can include children in any way, it might be they have something to say, or they have a drawing, or they light a candle, or whatever it might be. They can contribute in some way, and then they feel connected. And those are ways that you can involve them.
Yeah, I love that. And that can be a good memory for them, that they were part of it as opposed to excluded from it, unless they wanted to be, and that's okay too.
Right. And then it is a matter of, again, if your child is enrolled in a school, I would let school staff know about losses like this, because it does, what happens at home does go to school. So you want to let people know so that they can have an extra hug today, or a check-in with someone. And probably there are bereavement resources in your area. Again, if you're really remote, there might not be as many, but there are lots of things online, even for kids. So there are some really great resources for grieving for kids as well. And yeah, I think that that's really important to pay attention to.
Yeah, and letting friends' parents know of the
Mhm.
kids, you know.
Mhm.
It's creating like a warm, loving environment for everyone and who's going to be affected by it. So,
Right, right. And there may be people listening to this think, no, no, in my family, we're very stoic and we don't do that. And you know what? Again, your family. I do feel like it's important to allow kids to grieve if they're grieving. Allow all of us to grieve if we're grieving, right? And that's the other thing, Marnie, is all of the stuff we're talking about can bring up feelings of grief long before we've lost this person, right? So it's anticipatory grief. We're anticipating what's going to come,
yeah.
and that starts its own kind of grief process. And then that doesn't mean we're done. At the end, we're going to enter into another kind of grief process. And it's not like there's fine lines there. It's pretty blurry, but I can attest that anticipatory grief. In fact, I just sent out a newsletter this week, and that's what I talked about, was anticipatory grief, because it really is like, it's just the hits keep coming,
Yeah.
and you know what it is. Like, this is not, it won't always be this way. But if it feels different, it's because it is different. Things are going on.
Yeah, and it will come in waves and it will look different depending on time of year or occasion or, all the things, but I think just
Yeah.
it's all part of it.
Yeah. And, I guess in wrapping up all of these conversations, I have a lot of thoughts and ideas around some of these things, as you do too, and expertise that we're putting out there. But it's it's sometimes we overdo our shoulds. We should do this, we should do this, we should do this. I think it's important just to be aware. And when we start with awareness, then we can start to find what are the things we really know we need to do.
Yeah.
And how do we get the help for doing the things that feel hard for us, or that we feel clueless about? Because, it can feel really like, I have no idea how to do this, so.
Yeah. And it's asking for help when you feel like you need it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There are endless conversations we could have.
I know. Well, where can people find you?
Well, my business is Begin with the End, and it's beginwiththeend.co. Or you can send me an email at marnie@beginwiththeend.co.
Excellent.
How about you?
I am on, so my name's spelled CHRISTY. So it's Christy Yates, YATES.com. So ChristyYates.com is my website. That's a great place to find me. And then I also have lots of exposure through ALZ Authors. That's ALZauthors.com. And we talk a lot about dementia and all different kinds of dementia. So those are the two areas where I'm probably seen the most out there. But I do a lot of speaking events like this, and then I do coaching, and all of that's available on my website, so you can take a look there.
Well, thank you for being so open and sharing your wisdom. I really appreciate these conversations.
Yeah, no, these are great. And, maybe we'll do this again. I think it's great, and it's a great modeling for just digging in sometimes.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I will talk to you later.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.